Hello and welcome to the African Tech Roundup. Now, this is where we round up the most important tech, digital, and innovation highlights from across the African continent. My name is Andile Masugu, and with me on the mic is my main man, the consummate co-host, that is Musa Kalenga. What's up, bro?
What's up? I got a new title.
Yeah, yes. Man. Gotta refresh the thing.
Thank you very much. Good to be back, and always great to be chatting with everybody around Africa. Got a great show lined up.
Yes, we certainly do. We gotta stay dope, man.
Yes,
we gotta stay dope. Listen, we're also really pleased to have a special guest on this installment of the African Tech Roundup podcast. Joining us all the way from Germany is Oliver Sauter. Now, he's the co-founder and head of strategy, product, and operations at WorldBrain.io. Welcome to you, Oliver.
Thank you, guys. Welcome as well. Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to a nice chat around fake news and the world of the next internet, interoperability, data privacy, and we're gonna spasm out on that one.
I'm telling you. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, this is actually the very first time we've roped in a long distance participant in the main sort of flagship podcast because we certainly wanted in on everything you guys are trying to do at WorldBrain. We're going to hear a lot more about that. But your LinkedIn bio says that you've been working on battling misinformation since 2014. That's pretty much before fake news became a thing. So what the heck were you doing, bruh?
Yeah, I always say, like, before it became uncool.
Oh, fake news. Oh, snap.
You're like the Iron Man of fake news. I like that.
Yeah, like, I was back then, the topic of fake news for me was around agriculture and genetically modified food and nutrition and stuff like that. And I had the sense that this problem is a far bigger one and that needs to be solved in order for a lot of challenges in our global society to be solved in time. That is the critical point of that. And so it was a journey to get to that point, and I think we have a good plan now.
Yeah.
But we'll come to that part later.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Cool. And I mean, for the listeners who obviously can't see what we're doing, but we have a plan to help you we'll have a plan to pull the curtain back on the hustle. As it were, to let you in,
drama.
To draw back the curtain on the hustle.
Off the
Yes. No, but yeah, we have a documenter in the house. Shout out to you, Cindy Leah. She's off the mic, but she's taking photographs of everything we're doing behind the scenes. And the reason I mention this is because we're speaking to you via Skype. We've got a picture of you, and I was going to say, actually, because I was staring at you, and you can see us fully, Musa and I, that because of your background in genetically modified issues, you look like a healthy guy. I'm sensing not a fan of the GMO.
I'm actually a fan. Like,
are you for real? Really?
Yeah. I'm say I have a balanced view on the pros and cons of GMOs.
What are the pros? I'm interested to hear.
So we for real, we're going to spend a little time, and I'm not really well versed in the area, but I do think I have a leaning towards, hey, ancient grains and all that. Don't mess with my, don't mess with my food.
Don't mess with my food.
Don't mess with my food, bro. But just unpack that for us. I mean, that's just an unexpected sort of rabbit hole.
Yeah, we can, a few words about that. So basically, the gist of the whole GMO debate is that, everybody thinks that GMOs are super unhealthy and unsustainable, and that organic agriculture is so much better. And it certainly is not the case. A lot of genetically modified plants are actually very beneficial for the environment and can help us to be more sustainable in terms of like scaling up our agriculture to hold 12, 13, 15 billion people in the future. And the people I work with, they have also a very balanced view, and they call it GM organic, because the future should be to not have a binary view on, okay, this is bad and this is good, but picking the best stuff from each sector. So what can be learned from permaculture, what can be learned from organic agriculture, what can be learned from conventional agriculture, including GMOs, in order to just come up with the best and most sustainable concept. For example, like in the US, in the last 25 years, the area of corn that has been planted has quadrupled. But we have decreased the use of pesticides by 30% overall. And that is mainly due to the fact that we could use like herbicide-resistant plants.
So I'm going to stop you before people accuse us of plugging Monsanto on our show. No, I'm kidding. I'm messing with you. But no,
I'm not affiliating with Monsanto.
I know I'm messing with you. The reason I'm actually just kidding. It's just occurred to me that on this issue, you are, at least in terms of thinking and approach, similar to how we like to view digital innovation, tech, its application on the continent, the evolving narrative around what Africa needs and how. Yeah. And for a lot of people, it's this binary discussion of everyone needs a mobile phone or everyone needs this, or you know what I mean? Let's back agribusiness. Fintech's amazing, and we're like, well, it's a little more complicated than that. And I feel privileged actually to be schooled. I am so going to dig into this after this episode, and we probably have to have another one, given how big agro and agribusiness, agri-tech is becoming as a trend on the continent.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm actually speaking at an agri-tech conference soon.
A few words.
Musa,
and in general,
you're speaking where?
What I believe that people really need to learn is that the world is not black and white. It's to be jokingly about that, it's at least 50 shades of gray.
Oh my word! Mic drop moment. Mic drop moment. But Musa, you said you're speaking at an agri-tech?
Yes, I'm speaking at a distributors conference for a big agriculture firm. And one of the main topics there is kind of how agriculture is responding to this 21st century. And I really like what you're saying, because I also share the view that, taking kind of superior qualities from lots of interesting things actually produces a better outcome. And I think the scientific term is hybrid vigor or hybrid theory or something along those lines. But essentially it says you can take the best out of lots of kind of mediocre things, or the best out of a few bad things, and you can actually collectively create something better ultimately that serve the purpose of the ecosystem. So I think that actually complements exactly what you're saying around GM organic, as opposed to the quite a negative view that most people carry around GMO as an idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one has to be aware that this is big business also for the organic industry. So the organic industry puts about $1 billion a year into funding websites and ads, etc., into partly fear-mongering GMOs. Because obviously if you produce a binary thought in the consumer of like, okay, what do I do in order to get healthy kids, in order to stay healthy and support the environment? The only thing I know is GMOs are fucking bad. So the marketing label of organic says you can be 100% sure that there's no GMO in there. Right? And if you have a no nuanced view, you're gonna go for the organic food because you think, oh, okay, at least it's not GMO in there. And I don't have to know all the rest. It's just not GMO. And so,
wow,
it's like the argument for electric vehicles versus petrol vehicles. There's a whole psychology around how they're kind of preserving the petrol and diesel engines, and it's going to completely disrupt the value chain and the production line of all these big businesses that have made a lot of money from it. So,
but there's also the other view in that space that the spike in demand for everything that goes into making batteries and solar cells and all these other things, and the impact on the environment of those things. Like, not really talks about that. We go, okay, let's just use the sun. Well, it's not just putting a bowl of water out there and absorbing the sun's energy. It's like we have to sort of mine like rare minerals and places.
Vilibrium from Wakanda.
You know what I mean? So I'm so glad we started with this. And I think as a sort of tone setter for the kind of conversations we really hope to have with you, Oliver, thank you so much for doing this. Even before we did like the promo, like the promo segment, I am loving it. Now we have you on the show, not because we knew anything about your proclivities for genetically modified organics, but because of the work you guys do at WorldBrain, and how, frankly, perfectly on trend it is given this quote-unquote fake news crisis gripping the world, but also because your venture speaks to the broader debate regarding sort of personal data, what data is worth, how we as global citizens can start to wrest some of that control that we've lost back from big business that is have all sorts of agendas. And you're a proponent of open source software as well at a time when proprietary tech giants pretty much rule the world. So I'm hoping we get a chance to chat about all of this and more, and get a sense of how we as Africans ought to appropriately frame some of these issues in a way that accounts for our context. Being that you're in Berlin, Germany, we're increasingly a global village, but certainly certain things unique to us as a developing part of the world that we need to think about. So are you game for that, Oliver?
Of course.
All right, but
I'm all hot.
Fantastic, man. But first, let's do this. This episode of the African Tech Roundup is brought to you by
us.
Yes, absolutely, Musai. By us. That's right, folks. We're totally hijacking the sponsor segment to let you know that Musa and I will be hosting an African Tech Roundup live podcast event in Amsterdam on Tuesday, June the 5th. Now, in terms of the theme, well, we're going with #Village Diaries Amsterdam, because we're truly intending to bring the village to Amsterdam to get a sense of what's trending in the world of Africans and diasporans who are embedded in the city's growing local tech and innovation scene. But we also want to inquire into Amsterdam's distinctive Africa-centric impact innovation vibe. And then finally, we certainly want to test the nature and strength of the connections that Dutch-based Africa-focused tech and innovation actors, and we're talking everyone from founders, policymakers, impact and innovation architects, investors, corporate pros, all of those. What sort of connections are being made and maintained with the continent? We want to know all about this, and we're coming to find out. Amsterdam. The event will feature a panel discussion with UX designer from Booking.com, Babu Signoni. He's my homeboy from Zimbabwe. Of course, the Netherlands' very own director for private equity at Velocity Capital, Aled Lushinger. And you can look forward to a fireside chat and Q&A session with our very special guest for the evening, Niger born Charles Ojay. He's the founder. I love this fake crowd noise Musa keeps doing. I love it.
There's a crowd in here, man.
There's a crowd in here. Charles Ojay, of course, is the founder and CEO of Hyper. So listen, heads up though, if you're thinking this is going to be a place you come and attend and sit and listen or sit and watch, heads up. Our events are super interactive. So come ready to network with smart people and let your voice be heard right here in our village square. We fully intend to have as many of the most awesome views end up on the podcast and shared with the rest of the world. Here's your simple call to action. If you are an Amsterdam-based, Africa-focused founder, policymaker, innovation architect, investor, or corporate pro, do yourself a favor and head to africantechroundup.com/live to book yourself a seat to this event. You'll find all the deets you need, including time, venue details, and the agenda and speaker list, program. All of that is waiting for you at africantechroundup.com/live. And yes, we took longer than usual because this is our show and we're taking over the sponsor segment, folks.
Crowd goes wild.
Crowd goes wild. We can't wait to see you there. And so a quick shout out again to our event partners, of course, 1% Club and VC for Africa. Much love to them. Do check out the great work they're doing at 1%club.com and VC4A.com respectively. That's 1%club in words.com and VC4A.com. Now, before we get into this week's discussion with our special guest, Oliver Sauter of WorldBrain.io, Musa and I are going to chat through some of the month's more significant ecosystem highlights. Now, Oliver, you're welcome to jump in at any time you like to give us your take on things. Feel free, my brother. And Musa, you know how the deal goes.
Yes,
it's been a fairly jam-packed month in terms of tech and innovation news coming through. Well done to you, Africa. We're only going to shine a spotlight, our little African Tech Roundup spotlight, on what the team here considers noteworthy. So please, if you feel we are leaving something out, an important signal or trend that we might be sleeping on, do let us know by giving us a shout on Facebook via facebook.com/African Tech Roundup. Send us an email via hello@africantechroundup.com or by tweeting @African Roundup. Right, so let's get going. Speaking of Twitter, they're being taken to task for a serious bug which apparently allowed our passwords, those of us who use Twitter, allowed these passwords to be stored unencrypted on an internal log. Now, the company says it doesn't believe this data was compromised or accessed by dodgy elements. Sure. At least to their knowledge. So public service announcement, everybody, to all our villagers. If you're a Twitter user, please change your password. Like, stop listening and change your password and then carry on listening.
Yeah. Or say a little prayer.
Say a little prayer.
Say, our passwords, who art in Twitter, hello be thy data. Thy logs come.
May my Twitter, may my blue tick not be hijacked. Change your Twitter password.
Or add a 6 to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Add a 6 to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do you think there are actually people with passwords as simple as that still?
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
oh, hell yeah.
People.
Yeah. Oh, heck yeah. So anyway, to make matters worse, I mean, Twitter's top engineering dude, a guy called Parag Agrawal, goes on and tweets this. Now, he says, we're sharing this information to help people make an informed decision about their account security. We didn't have to, but believe it's the right thing to do.
What smack? I mean, really?
I mean, dude,
really?
Come on. And so, you know, I'm leading with this because of the sort of Facebook infomercial we did in the last episode. and it has to be said, I have to, you know, fess up. Twitter is my favorite social media platform.
Really?
It really is.
Oh, okay. No, I'm not a Twitter person. Well, I'm kind of Twitterish, but I wouldn't say my favorite.
No, you're not a Twitter person, actually.
No.
I'll go as far as saying that for you.
Thank you for defining that.
But yeah, but I mean, that said, find him at Musakalinga on Twitter. But yeah, don't expect much movement. But he's on Twitter, but he's not a fan like I am. So, but I say this really because I feel like you know, we often get like pushback on, no, you guys really drag people on the show and stuff, and it really isn't that. You noticed at the top, we had no problem telling people to reach us on Facebook. Mm-hmm. We're fully on board the utility that platform provides. Twitter, we love. But when people get it wrong, they get it wrong, right, Musa?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, So absolutely, Twitter, this is unacceptable. Of course, to Agrawal's, to Parag's, you know, credit, he did, you know, backtrack and say that wasn't right. And really, in the light of us finding out that the same sort of researcher that gave Facebook or that, you know, sold Facebook data to Cambridge Analytics, you know, it's barely a week since we found out that he also at some point had access to Twitter's back end. I mean, really, at the end of the day, like, you could have been a little more sensitive to, you know, how we're all feeling about this, and certainly your responsibility to do the right thing. We shouldn't have to sort of drag you in order to do it and embarrass you on your own platform.
Absolutely.
Parag. But that said, staying with social media news, I feel like I'm obliged to check in with you guys, certainly with Musa, who was here last time. Oliver, feel free to factor in on how you're feeling about the whole Facebook fallout, because since the last show, Zuckerberg has appeared before the US Senate. Apparently the only place or the only government he's talking to or feels he, you know, has the right to summon him. But yeah, that's happened. And then, of course, the WhatsApp co-founder Jan Koum resigning from Facebook's board. Just in case you forgot, Facebook bought WhatsApp for $19 billion in 2014, and Koum personally netted around $7 billion. He's apparently had enough now, and Facebook further has admitted, since last month, since we were last on the mic, that some 59,777 users in South Africa were potentially, quote unquote, potentially impacted by the Cambridge Analytica scandal. And so, yes, given those things, how are you guys feeling right now?
Do you believe in the delete Facebook campaign, Oliver?
No, not really. It's like it is a temporary push, but Facebook has. Even though I don't support Facebook as a company and as the strategies they have for, like, the thoughts they have for the web, they have been incredibly successful in creating network effects that are really hard to break. So you can't just leave Facebook. You will leave a lot of social contacts. You will leave a lot of information behind, even though comment sections, for example, are not always good, but there's basically like Amazon's reviews. It's really a trove of information that is hard to, like, get out.
Yeah. And also, isn't it problematic also that whether or not you're on Facebook, we've all since discovered that they are profiling you, and you basically have to join them in order to make them stop.
Yeah, they even track you if you're not on Facebook.
Yeah.
So you may know that the Facebook like button is a tracker, on every website that you visit that has the Facebook like button, you're tracked by Facebook.
Yeah.
And even if you're not a Facebook user, they analyze your IP and your buying behaviors and stuff like that. So
yeah,
it's not cool at all.
Well, as far as updates go, it's not exactly a cheery one, but there you go. Staying with data, though, we think it's quite telling that any African startups with data play aspirations seem to be the toast of the town in VC terms. And I'm not just talking about some of the fintech startups like Branch and Mcorp that we basically roasted on our last episode. And it's worth mentioning, by the way, that since our last episode, Proparco, they're the private sector financing arm of France's AFD. Well, they've made their first fintech investment on the continent, sinking $3 million in the Cape Town-based startup Jumo, which, guess what? Unbanks the underbanked. Sorry, not unbanks. That banks the unbanked and the underbanked people. It's this whole, we're trying to sort of promote financial inclusion thing through financial services via mobile phones. Yeah, and so this trend doesn't seem to be stopping anytime soon. But there are other data plays making headway, like M-Survey, for example. They're a mobile-first consumer feedback platform for businesses and consumers on the continent. They announced the Series A round of $3.5 million. That was led by TLCom Capital.
Shout out to my boy who led that fundraise, hey?
Oh, for real?
Jacob, yeah.
Oh, for real?
Yeah, Eritrean origin.
Okay.
Good boy.
Okay. So no, for real. That was really cool. I mean, just FYI, if you want to know more about M-Survey, go ahead and head to africantechroundup.com, click on the quick tech chats button in the main menu, scroll down to listen to my conversation with the company's founder and CEO, Kenfield Griffith. He gave quite an insightful take on where he believes data analytics is going and how key it is to sort of optimizing business. So he's definitely a friend of the show, but also quite different to M-Survey, but still within the data business genre, Asoka Insight, a London-based startup with research bases in Nairobi, Lagos, Abidjan, Addis Ababa, and Accra. Now, they offer data and analysis on companies from the continent for global investors. Now, think what CB Insights do in New York or around the world, frankly. Thomson Reuters, the likes of those kind of guys. They landed $3.6 million in funding around about the same time M-Survey did, bringing the startup funding they've raised to a total of $8 million since they were founded in 2014. So, I'm setting the picture for, okay, definitely all these signals pointing to data and data plays of various kinds being, very sort of quote unquote investable. And here's my question though, guys. 5 years ago, 3 years ago, even a company like Cambridge Analytica would have been the toast of the town. They were definitely doing all the talks. They were being invited to all these places to talk about all their exploits in the data analytics space and how they were, doing research differently and helping their clients achieve things through behavioral analysis and all these interesting things that were all data related. Fast forward a couple of years and we're all going, oh my word, that horrible company, I suppose my question to you, Oliver, is how excited should we be, or perhaps cautious should we be at news like this? In terms of emerging data plays on the continent that could potentially be either the next big thing in Facebook terms or the next big thing in terms of Cambridge Analytica and the problems we're seeing there.
It's it's very difficult to make a simplified analysis of that situation. I think the case with Cambridge Analytica is the problem to what it's been used, the data. So when you look, for example, into the ad business, behavioral analytics is nothing new. It has been used for since ads have been invented. You try to manipulate people, and you now have just better tools to do that.
Wow, you make it sound so nice, right? Manipulate people, but you're right. That's what it is, right?
Yeah, that's what it is. You try to get someone to buy something they were not aware of buying before. And the same is for a political candidate. They're not aware that they want to vote for a certain political candidate, and you want to make them do that. I believe that essentially it's more about, in the long run, how is our data be used and how can we control its use that would democratize the ability to withdraw access for certain usages. So for example, I don't want to have my data be analyzed for political purposes, but right now I can't do anything about it because Facebook or Twitter or Google are all in control of my data. And so, yeah, I have no hope that it will change measurably without people having data ownership and without also laws changing in the ways companies can use our data.
So, being a marketing practitioner, I'm going to put a marketing practitioner. I'm going to put it to you that it's the science and the art of persuasion, right? What you call manipulation. But what I'd like to find out from you. So, obviously, we understand that data can be used towards negative and or unsavory ends. But we also understand that data can be used towards very positive ends, right? And my question is, given the stage and the state of advancement of most of the population of the world, who may or may not have an understanding of what actually positive ends would be, is a Cambridge Analytica really that bad? Because we are now diagnosing them based on something that went wrong, which wasn't, as we've mentioned, entirely new to the world that we live in. It just...
By the way, Obama did it as well. Obama did it.
Correct.
Like in the Obama campaign, it was also used behavioral analytics. And
correct.
So yeah, I agree.
Correct.
It's nothing new.
I think what might have fueled it, I think correctly so, is that when you add the layer of politics, which politics are, it's a really touchy subject, and it's something that, how do you have the right to decide on the right way to vote for a person who's uninformed about the data or the information that you're using to be able to get them to think about a candidate or have particular views. So from that perspective, I agree. But the contrary view is that if you use data to be able to drive at ultimately a greater good for everyone, surely businesses like Cambridge Analytica should be hailed, and they should be held accountable and try to be put into a place where they're more accountable to the good they can do as opposed to the bad they can do. Just a contrary view.
Not a contrary view. I actually agree with that.
Okay.
So, definitely everything's a butter knife, right? You can use a butter knife to kill someone, but you can also...
Very inefficiently, Oliver. There are better ways. There are better ways to kill someone.
Yeah, of course. But you can. It's about the opportunity. So you can do a lot of cool stuff with data. And again, it comes to the point of how can we ensure that you decide on what the data is used for, and how do we keep companies accountable for the actions they're doing with that data. And certainly, the question is, what would have happened if Hillary Clinton gotten president and Cambridge Analytica would have been the company making that possible? The question is, what would be the outrage about that? Would people be really so frustrated about this circumstance, like with Obama, or would they just give it a pass because it was agreeable for one side of the political spectrum to use that?
Yeah, you guys have got me reflecting. I mean, even when you look at this whole fintech thing and how big business in general, not just fintech players that are coming to the party now, banks, mobile telcos, frankly, anyone with a massive incentive to milk unsuspecting or sometimes willing users of their platform or products or services of their data in order to make more money or, sell more things. When I think about it, I think on the continent, my issue really is more with the lack of nuance and sort of explaining both sides of what happens when you allow a certain thing to happen. So in the case of when you allow use of data in a certain direction or by certain entities for certain purposes, yes, there's steps forward for humanity in some way. Let's acknowledge that. Fine. Let's not pretend there are no benefits. But let's also not pretend that there aren't sort of rubs to that as well. Mm-hmm. I think everyone needs to be held to account for the level of oversimplification they allow themselves to adopt or embrace in order to justify profit mongering.
Yeah, and obviously that the reciprocal view is that consumers ultimately also need to be held to account in some way, shape, or form, right?
Yep.
So,
us.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, whether it's the process of educating at the same time as you enforcing certain ways to ensure that people have got an understanding. I mean, I think about some of the businesses I'm involved in and the data that we collect to try and essentially make, as an example, better decisions for small businesses. And the reality is, through the capability coupled with the data that they can give us, we can make really amazing decisions for their business, but they can't turn around and then say, oh, you've used my data for something when you've benefited for it all along, So there's a reciprocal accountability, which I battle with in my head, because I try and figure out, how do you police that? How do you enforce that? How do you, or don't you?
I would give a segue to the interoperability issue here.
Yeah.
Because this is, I think, key component to make that possible. So, for example, if right now we're all frustrated with Facebook and the delete Facebook movement has no effect because the network effects are so strong, right? So we effectively cannot just all move to another network.
It's like you go first. No, you go first. No, you delete it first. No, you delete it. And then I'll go. Then no one goes.
I bet you go first. I bet $10. So basically we're all locked into the service and we cannot move. And this is the kind of accountability from a consumer side that cannot happen. So we cannot just say, okay, I want to quit. I want to now use Facebook too, because Facebook too is more privacy intensive but provides me the same features. And this is then what needs to happen is the right of interoperability, which I'm really happy now that the European Union has passed the GDPR laws, because they're literally stating now all those companies need to provide machine-readable endpoints where I can get all my data that is related to me out of Facebook, out of Google, out of Asana, out of Slack, out of whatever service I use, and which will form this kind of which would just make it possible that people migrate and vote on certain behaviors by companies with their wallets and with their data.
So, but I want to ask you guys a question then based on that. I mean, does that dynamic not signal the demise of certain business models that has allowed us to see the level of innovation and creativity we've so far seen in what's currently big tech?
Not sure. Well, I don't see it as that.
So can you repeat that question? I'm not sure if
Operability.
I will conquer this. I will get this thing done. Does interoperability not signal to some extent a scuppering or even perhaps the demise of a certain era of sort of innovative thinking and innovative approach? Because that's part of the argument. People are saying this is IP. We work hard to build it, and we need laws that help us protect it. And interoperability sort of undermines this. It's great for the consumer, but in the long term, it's going to disincentivize innovation.
Is it the end of a particular era? Potentially. So I think the end of the era of unchecked businesses that benefit from the network effect principle. Yes. But I think the network effect is now being used with the consumer squarely at the center of the benefit of that network effect, if that makes sense, right? So I think, yes, the end of an era of people that were able to build huge volumes of populations of people that got value and got locked in because of the network effect. But the era that we're now going into is that the principle is still that people will gravitate towards the thing or the platform or the technology that brings the most value. It's just now there's an easier way for them to switch between. So, I mean, I liken it to moving banks, right? The switching cost of being able to go from one bank to another, or the switching cost of being able to, change a service is now being enabled such that you are not unnecessarily held hostage by the fact that they have so much data and there aren't actually substitutes for that service or that utility.
Yes, I agree. And I would add that the argument for innovation is done before based on having enough capital to do so. I believe that the argument for innovation in the future is based on the ability for the user to move and thus getting the best service they need. So innovation happens around the user. And secondly, that we need to move, and I think we move into an era of collaboration instead of competition. Where companies, for example, say you have 5 different to-do list apps. Right now, all those to-do list apps repeat the same work over and over again, but they have the same data model underneath or almost the same. So it's a title, a body, an assigned person, whatever. But they need to replicate all this work, right? And if you're in a space where interoperability is key, people will start collaborating on key infrastructure. I believe that's my assumption of how that will play out. And then innovation can really happen because you can start developing a to-do list app that is for a scientist versus one that is for a journalist versus one that is for a student. And
not one that's created on the basis of we are Facebook or we are Apple, and
it's not a huge brand anymore.
It's not a brand anymore.
Like we're building this like ecosystem, and in this ecosystem there's many different players, and we earn just as much as we can serve the best product to the maximum amount of users. And if those users don't think we're the best product for them, we don't earn money on them.
Right.
And I'd actually take it a step further, and just listening to how you've articulated that. I mean, I think in a couple of years' time, I also kind of would wonder, does that mean there'd be kind of a natural death of sectors or industries as we know them, and they would kind of be replaced by utility, right? So organizations and industry will be arranged around utility as opposed to sectors, if that makes sense.
So there's a word for that. It's called Amazon. Pretty much.
Right? So I mean, I think that because that connects a lot of dots around, if we get interoperability right, it connects a lot of dots around if we're able to continue to innovate to solve the issue of utility. Because I think it becomes about utility at the end of the day, right? Does this thing solve a problem for a human being? So that'll continue to be square and center in my mind. But then the constructs of traditional, sectors or industries or verticals, that then just falls apart, I assume, because then you can have, people in pharmaceuticals technically who've created utility in hospitality as an example.
Yeah.
And then you do away with that kind of artificial structure of
So I'm going to ask you a question based on what you're asking right now as a brand marketer.
Right. It's a mess. I can answer your question.
So in the context of what you just described,
it's a mess.
How the whole notion of building brands, and brand as a differentiator, as sort of a unique selling proposition, as some sort of unfair advantage in a market, all of that. Yeah. You're basically saying a time is coming that might not be a way to think about life. Yeah,
it'll become a mess. It's already a mess, because I think if that's the view, then kind of the functional components of a brand start to become increasingly more irrelevant. The emotive components of the brand become where the value sits, because if emotionally I've got you, because I'm ingrained in your heart and your mind in such a way that you believe I can solve any problem for you, then it actually doesn't matter what sector I'm solving it in, right? So if Apple, as an example, has got a special place in my heart, and as a consumer, I believe Apple has brought me a wonderful device experience because of the machine I use. If Apple then says to me, here's some medicine, why don't you try it out? Because of the
like position, Google is doing with pharmaceuticals,
correct,
or insurance or whatever.
All right, because the brand equity around the problem they've solved for me in the past and the relationship I feel I have with them as a brand, kind of I'll forgive them for going into another industry and offering me a service. In fact, I'll be more receptive to it. So yes, it'll become a mess for brand marketers traditionally, because I think increasingly the functional components of what we go out and we say are, better price, better this, better that, and insurance and banks and all of them are literally going to be in trouble because of it. Their business models were built around their brands were built along functional lines. So it's going to require a more astute and a more adept marketer, number one. Number two, it's going to require a marketer who can see into the future, so they can connect unrelated dots of the most probable movement where they'll be from where they are, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And the reason I said Amazon, and I said it tongue in cheek, is because I think they're just killing the whole platform play, which I think is what we're talking about, except not just behind a single brand. It is in the case of Amazon, right?
Yeah.
So,
for example, something like this infrastructure, if it is done interoperably, it is somewhat interoperably, like, you have like all the marketplace participants that can have their own shops on Amazon. So it creates this kind of platform that allows other players also to make money, except like not only Amazon, even though Amazon makes money off them as well. But for some things, it's very, very hard to bring this interoperability into place, because if you have a logistics business, you have a lot of hardware. With software businesses, it will be a bit easy. It will be a bit easier.
Quick one, sorry, we've jumped the gun. I know we're already in interoperability as a subject, but we didn't actually define it. So I know there's a lot of us that are maybe out there that have been hearing this word or have interacted with it. But I'd really like for you just to define what in your mind interoperability is, so that I suppose we've got a common place of departure. I think it's
so. Perhaps it'd also be useful for me to sort of, because there's some news highlights that might also help, land this for our audience. And then Oliver, please factor in on what this word means within your context and how you're thinking about it. And I'm actually particularly interested in your take on this because you're an open source software proponent, and I'm wondering if that colors your view of the word and what it means and how it ought to be you sort of applied. But so in that vein, let's talk interoperability. That hateful word that I can't say today. I don't know if I want to do it. So in the context of what's happening, what's really trending right now in East Africa, certainly in Kenya, is the fact that M-Pesa, thanks to efforts by the country's ICT ministry and the Communications Authority of Kenya, frankly putting pressure on the various mobile telco players, not least Safaricom, that own M-Pesa. They finally succeeded in seeing M-Pesa become interoperable, which in this context basically means that M-Pesa is now usable across other networks, not just Safaricom. After Tanzania, Kenya is reportedly only just the second African country to pull this off. And what does this all mean? Well, prior to the introduction of wallet-to-wallet interoperability in this context, mobile money platforms in Kenya largely were, I suppose, sort of walled gardens, and only subscribers of specific mobile telcos could sort of send money to each other via these wallets. So Safaricom users could use M-Pesa, Airtel users had their own thing, and so on and so forth. And now all of that has changed. And trending in South Africa, on the other hand, is First National Bank, one of the country's largest banks, rolling out an interoperable version of their very popular e-wallet function, which was, if you're an FNB customer, a wallet that you could use to send money to anybody with a smartphone number. The person would receive that amount, request a PIN, and then go to any ATM and withdraw. But that's something that was limited to being an FNB client, at least in terms of sending the money. Anyone could receive it provided they had a phone. Now with what they're calling e-wallet extra, anyone, provided you're a South African citizen, which sucks because I can't use it, can use it, can basically send money to any number. So basically they're banking anybody who cares to use the service. And I'm just using that as an example, a practical example within the African context of what interoperability within a technological context might look like when a big brand like FNB or Safaricom decide, actually, let's allow more than just the people within our data set or within our customer base to use the service and actually interact with other platforms. In the case of M-Pesa, now you can interact between M-Pesa and PayPal, for example, for the first time. So that's just another example of that. So in the context of Berlin and Germany, like, what is it looking like, and what's your thinking in terms of this?
So interoperability can be seen from different contexts, and the interoperability that you mentioned is one of more of an with PayPal and this other payment services, for example, the integration. It's not necessarily an interoperability in itself. And interoperability means that if you have access to the protocol, you can exchange information in that sense. And so, for example, a good old example for interoperable protocols is email. You can use any email client and you can still send each other emails, right? You can swap out the email client and suddenly you can still, it doesn't matter which email client you use. And so this interoperability in that context means that a data structure, for example, can be used in many different contexts, and many different applications can have this common denominator where they can talk to each other. And in a more modern context, it would mean that you could use WhatsApp and send people on Telegram a message.
Yeah. And so how intentional do you have to be in the founding stage of a technological platform? How early on does this need to be part of your thinking or your plan for this to be possible as you've described it?
From the get-go. So what we're, for example, developing this summer is, or maybe a quick wrap up what we do. So what we do is we develop your own personal mini Google for your browsing history. And it will evolve into this kind of web research assistant, or Snippy jokingly said, your browser on steroids, where you can do stuff, interact with content, in a much deeper way. And one of the features that will afford this is comments and annotations. So you can basically attach comments to pages for your own notes, and also highlight pieces of the text and make notes on the highlights instead of like going to a note-taking application and doing that. And
sorry, and all of that happening without you sort of surrendering data to third parties who are busy monetizing
this
it
data
elsewhere.
is completely on your computer. We have, as a company, never access to this data. So that's yours. Our business model also doesn't depend on monetizing your data. What we're doing is we're building the data model for the annotations on a data format called the Open Annotation Data Model, which is already a standard defined by the W3C consortium. So this means every annotation software that supports the standard can read the annotations. And there's no additional integration necessary. For example, if you use Gmail and Evernote, yes, and those two companies need to provide integrations to each other, and that is a singular work and need to be replicated for every single integration that another person does, right? And interoperability means that this integration doesn't need to happen anymore because there is a common format, a standard that everybody that supports that standard can read it. And so every participant, every app can exchange information.
So that's the difference between the example of M-Pesa now having a bridge to PayPal, for example, and the difference between that and what FNB has created as a whole new platform that allows anyone with a cell phone number to basically create a wallet with them.
So they created a standard, and they created a standard, whereas the other created the integration.
Right.
So, I mean, a few things, because it's really fascinating. So the incentive to cooperate to this extent, right, without it necessarily being mandated and or someone having to do it because of any commercial incentive. Surely, how do you drive that? So if you look at it, the great example of emails, at some stage there needs to be a protocol written for emails to be able to be received by lots of different technologies and in lots of different formats, so that anyone could pretty much transfer, across. But there was a protocol that was written, and everyone had to subscribe to that protocol, and that protocol became a standard, right? So in the different industries and the different, verticals or technologies, there would still be a reliance on standardization of some sort. And that standardization obviously would drive this interoperable, participation and or collaboration. Am I right?
Yes, you're right. And indeed, there's also challenges with stuff like that. So for example, updating an email protocol, it has been there for decades in that form. So, getting all the participants to upgrade is a really tricky challenge, and is sometimes even impossible. So for example, if you now want to suddenly support location integration into email, like you can do with WhatsApp messages or whatever, then this is just not possible unless everyone subscribes to a new email standard. And what I think is necessary is, and this is now driving deep into economics, is that we need to have, on the economic level of how companies operate and how companies interoperate, we need more incentive structures for collaboration. Because if we have these incentive structures for collaboration, then many more companies have an incentive to collectively change the protocols. Right now, if you have 10 email providers, they're 10 out of 10,000, but they might want to change the protocol, but they need to convince everyone else. But if everyone else is based on like, okay, hey, we built an email protocol and we just have the incentive to abstract costs away to collaborate, then a change might happen faster.
So some of the biggest companies of our time are essentially companies that are built on going, heck, we've been smart enough and clever enough and resourceful enough to build all these competencies in-house. Thank goodness for capitalism that allows us to protect our interests and sort of and profit from the hard work we've put in. You're basically suggesting a scenario that would upend the very premise on which an Apple or a Microsoft exist, or an SAP exist and thrive.
Indeed we are. And we have also internally in our company, we don't have shares. So if we go down to the economic level of how
What?
Do you have land at least? Can you have land? Like no shares? Can you have land?
So you just like, I wish you had seen like how Musa and I looked at each other, like, dear villagers, like Musa and I just like stared at each other like, no shares?
Like we work on a different economic model, and it's called Steward ownership. And if you want, I can send you a TED talk by Armin Stoyanagel, who propagates this model.
Can you give us the executive summary?
The basic motivations of that change was that I realized that shares as a participation model in growth creates an incentive structure for competition and centralization of power. This is because an investor will go into a company and invest only under the premise that the virtual value of that company increases, right? Like it is a virtual intersubjective agreement that many people make when defining the value of a company, which is not directly bound to the actual value that this company generates.
This is true. Which is why you can be a loss-making entity like Uber and still be valued at like billions and billions of...
Exactly. And for some businesses, you need that in order to grow and build this infrastructure, this ecosystem. But you need that growth capital to increase the ecosystem of that particular company. If you have an ecosystem of many companies that can abstract fundamental growth work together, then then every single company doesn't need 500 million to grow. Every company maybe needs 10. And if there are 50 companies, then they have 500 million to make growth work. So coming back to the incentive or the motivations of changing the way we do business is that through this virtual growth of a company, and the expectations of the investors that this growth happens, the company is incentivized to suck in all users and all economic power as much as possible because only that justifies the hype.
Yes, basically be Amazon or be Apple or be Uber because it's all or nothing. It's a zero-sum game.
Exactly. And what that creates is centralization, and it creates competition because you need to compete against everyone else in order to win. And it also rips away the stewardship of the company's people.
Yeah. That's how we end up seeing guys send tweets like, well, we didn't have to tell you that your passwords were unprotected. Indicative of sort of like an erosion of stewardship, I'd imagine.
I'm not sure if I could build that bridge. To be honest.
No, I just mean, look, if there's a direct and very firm line between a business you're building and the good it's creating for society and the responsibility you have towards society to build a business that's both good for you and whoever's building it as well as society, there's almost no room. And I'm sorry, I'm sort of throwing the poor guy under the bus, but the attitude you take isn't, well, we don't have to report if something goes wrong. It's the default position actually should be, we're accountable to you as society regardless. And I know, and based on what you're saying, that I can see how that can erode when you have a concentration of power.
Yes, you have incentives to cheat.
So you described quite well the status quo. So give me a sense now. So with stewardship as the model, what are the founding principles? How is that different?
So I'm not an anti-capitalist, just to make that sure. I believe growth is important, and I believe it is important to increase the value of a company. But it's about that with share-driven companies, you have an unlimited growth expectation, right? It is unbelievable for me that a Peter Thiel invests 500,000 and gets out with $1 billion in returns. Like I cannot compute how this is a fair contribution to his actual investment and risk that he took. It's just too much. And so the requirements for steward ownership means that you have a limited return, but a fair, like a proper return based on the risk you take, and that the company always stays in full control of their operations and not in the control of investors. And that you eliminate the virtual component of how the value is defined of the company.
Yeah.
Because the virtual component increases speculation and brings us in all these cycles. And I believe many, if not most, problems we have in the world can be boiled down, if you follow the why, to the way we do business and the way we have the speculation in our economies.
So risk, you mentioned risk, right? Because that I think is the reason, you said, how is it that Peter Thiel can put in 500,000 and get, crazy multiples back? So it's this notion of risk, right? It's this notion that, I'm pretty much taking, I'm foregoing X amount to invest it in you because I believe in you. And therefore that foregoing, there's a risk allocated to that. And there's a risk allocated to you as an individual potentially fulfilling or not fulfilling, on what I'm investing in. So I'm interested to understand the definition of risk, how it's different. Or are you just simply saying that you define the risk according to a pre-agreed set of standards or, whatever it may be, such that it never goes past a certain level?
The risk definition is pretty similar if you would have a funding round with a VC. Like the risk is the same for the same stage of a project.
Okay.
So steward ownership means that the investor gets shares, but these shares have no voting rights. There's one element of it. So they can never influence your decisions. They have some red lines, obviously. If like the third year losses, then they can decide and have escalation paths in order to replace you as a steward of the company, which is fine. But they have no direct voting rights or can force you to sell the company or stuff like that. But second factor is the shares are non-tradable. They're just there to have a security for the investor in case stuff goes wrong. And the company has the right to buy back those shares at any given time to a predefined multiplication factor. So, for example, what we're offering investors now is to say you get 5 times the amount that you invested back in cash. And it's paid back by the profits, the EBITs that we have per month. And this way you have you're in it for the long term, you get a proper return on invest, and you get it in cash. It's not just that you have to wait until in 10 years you get maybe your exit and stuff like that. You get it continuously over those years until the debt is paid back, until every share is bought back.
Technically speaking, you're not looking for an investor in the traditional sense. You're looking for a well-informed, hopefully well-heeled, and fairly understanding fan/believer.
Yes, yeah.
Because I'm not gonna.
We're just not looking for.
You're not
VCs.
incentivizing me on how I can trade. I can. This is a tradable asset. Or you're not giving me tons of opportunity to exit on a way up to based on a valuation that's not linked on real returns. You're basically reorganizing the market, and for me to buy into that, I need to believe.
Yeah. So to agree, that was a bit fast before. Yes, I agree. And this is actually how it should be with every business. If you have a business that you run, you need to believe in it. If you're an investor, you need to believe in it. You shouldn't do it to invest in 50 companies and you just have 2 flying.
Oh my word.
You should invest in every business that you believe in and stick with it for at least 10 years.
Okay.
This should be the time frame of every business. And if you make it based on the profits, then even a 10 million investment that seems like only VC scale can be profitable, because then you can say, if that is a Series A, you might only get back 3 times the money, but you get 30 million back over the next 10, 15 years. And if the company is highly profitable, then you might get it back in 8 years. But your expectation is set. You cannot go beyond that. And this means the incentive structures suddenly shift towards collaboration, because suddenly you can give away profits because you serve the users that you need to serve, and you serve them the best, and that's why you get profits.
I just thought of something. Collaboration versus casino.
So it is building the casino in order to play together.
Yeah.
And not against each other.
Fantastic. So listen, we're going to move on because we really are out of time, but there's some important things we need to touch on before we let you go. It's been incredible so far. There's something you mentioned in passing that I want us to revisit. This idea that our previous guest in last episode, Marvin Colby, you've mentioned it as well. This notion of being in a position to own your data and presumably be in a position to sell it or sort of benefit in some commercial way from owning your data. What does that look like in real terms? Because that sounds like a nirvana that can't happen. Yeah, what does that look like? Is that even a thing? Is it possible?
So interoperability is definitely a step towards that. The vision of how that would look like is pretty much the way you described it before, where you as a user have you have the rights to move and own. Do not necessarily own it. It can be in the hands of Facebook, but you have the rights to move it and to use it in whatever ways you want, and maybe trade them. Like maybe have an open market, and there's tons of companies in the world that start already doing this. And in Berlin, for example, Ocean Protocol, that started a blockchain-based company on having a decentralized marketplace for your personal data.
Oh, wow.
Means that you suddenly could say, hey, there's a research group that needs particular data from me, and I give them access to it, and they give me a few cents for that. Or asking, an ad agency, like an ad provider could suddenly analyze my data without my data leaving my computer and get a profile of me, but not knowing that I visited this website, not knowing what I bought, not like the company itself not knowing that.
Yeah.
And what really I think a shift that needs to happen in the consumer's mind is to understand how much your data is actually worth. Because if you look in, for example, how much money Facebook, Google, et al. Do with make on your data, it goes maybe in Africa into the hundreds, but in Europe and in the US, it goes into the thousands of dollars of worth. That is
per person
that your data is worth.
Sure.
And the only problem is how do we incentivize people to get back that data? Because there's a couple of services that out there say, hey, we help you to get back your data, and you have like your data store, and then you can do whatever you want with it. The problem is there is no real world incentive to make that step and go and download your data, because there is no marketplace yet.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you need to have a marketplace first in order to have your data be sold, and the marketplace won't come until there's data to be sold. So this is a typical chicken egg problem.
Sorry, and furthermore, in our context in emerging markets in Africa, you need to have a digital identity to have centralized data, right? So the starting point is actually, we solve for a market segment we call the digitally invisible, which is the long tail. So step one is, you need to make most people visibly or digitally visible before they can have a profile that becomes tradable on a marketplace that would then be able to actually, be of value.
So I want to ask
Yes.
you both then, what, in the context of this discussion, what future tax are we liable?
Data tax, man.
What future tax are we liable to have to cough up as a continent if we don't come right in terms of thinking around this issue? Like, we're in this nascent environment you've just described, Musa.
Yeah.
Okay, where obviously there's so a lot of these sort of financial inclusion plays, data plays of all sorts are arguing that they're doing what you're saying. They're actually helping promote economic growth and economic participation by bringing formerly quote unquote invisible people in digital terms to the table in ways that no one else is willing to do, even if, they had the means to do it, like a bank or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they're arguing they're doing really good, Facebook included, right? They're doing so much good because the net effect is that, these are incredible. There's incredible potential they're bringing online. But what I'm saying is this is happening simultaneously with like the most intense data scraping of anywhere in the planet that's accompanying these efforts. So what sort of future tax should we expect in the context of what you've said, Oliver, and what you've said, Musa?
You mean future tax or tech?
No, tax as in TAX. What's the opportunity cost of us not coming right on this issue, or like in terms of failing to appreciate the value of our data at this particular time in history? What could the potential negative repercussions be in the future?
An extreme version of now, where you have very proprietary companies exploiting your data for reasons and purposes you have no knowledge or no control over.
Yeah. I kind of see it like domain squatting. Remember back in the day where you could buy, isn't it the same concept as domain squatting? It's like, I think it'll be like digital identity squatting.
Someone's going to own me online.
Correct. Without you knowing that they're owning you, and they'll be making profits from it because, they'll find a way to, yeah. So I think that's an extreme view, but that's typically what the commercial model would be.
Oh my word. So guys, we're going to move on a little bit, but I think that is just the sobering thoughts, the way you just put it there. Dang, bruh. So anyway, we have a few more items I just want to touch on. Just by the by, because it's important for the Village Square to start to factor in on these issues. Guys, we really want to hear from you on this. Give us a shout on social, Facebook, Twitter, send us an email, whatever you need to do to get your voice heard on all the matters we're discussing here, because we want to hear what it means to you. And this is also why it's quite important that we get to the next thing I want to talk about, which is a disturbing trend creeping across the continent. Tanzania is now one of several African countries doubling down on internet regulation efforts that certainly go against the spirit of an open internet. They potentially violate individual privacy. They trample certainly on citizens' rights to free speech and expression. It's basically, summed up in this ambiguous new law called the Electronic and Postal Communications, in brackets, Online Content Regulations 2018, which now requires bloggers, get this, bloggers to pay the Tanzanian government $930 a year to license a blog. Wait, I'm not sure if it's per year or once off. Regardless, I think it's per year. And in addition to this, the government reserves the right to grant or withhold certification for any would-be blogger in the country. This applies to online radio, television streaming services, online forums, social media users. In fact, to be an authorized online content provider, you need to fill out a form detailing the estimated cost of your investment, the number of directors, stakeholders on the platform, the share of your capital, staff, qualifications, expected dates of commencing operations, and future growth plans, guys. And then get this, you better not publish content that, quote, sort of causes annoyance, threatens harm or evil, encourages or incites crimes, or jeopardizes national security or public health and safety.
So don't speak.
Yeah. Or you could lose your license. Within 12 hours, or you could face fines of not less than, in excess of $2,000, or even a year in prison.
Jeez.
Internet cafes are even expected to install surveillance cameras to record and archive activities inside their business premises. I mean, this is ridiculous. And this is all in the wake of Uganda's quote unquote innovative move to tax social media users. The government's saying they're trying to curtail gossip on Facebook and Twitter, And then the Ugandan president, Yoweri Museveni, estimated in a letter to his country's treasury that imposing a daily fee of up to 100 Ugandan shillings on all users would net the government something like $400 million a year. So he's like, yeah, this could also be a handy means of sort of raising much needed revenue for our government. So guys, I'm raising this to put it out there, like, you're in Germany, you must be thinking that is nuts, because I know how liberal Germany is with regards to some of these issues. But yeah, what do you guys make of this, guys?
Oh, dude, it's just so disheartening. It's just like, the lesson is that antiquated policies about trying to regulate human behavior is just, there's no way in hell it's going to work. Excuse my very emotional viewpoint. But for me, it just really, it goes back to the fact that I think government and policymakers and people that are making these decisions are so far removed from the reality of technology, from the reality of the problems that technology can potentially solve for people. And they're putting into place laws, processes, governance, whatever you want to call it, that actually just show them up as being quite ignorant, in my view. So it upsets me, because I think there's a lot that can be done with the energy and the time to liberate people, to try and get them to, into the economic system, better educated, et cetera, with the same amount of energy that's spent putting into place these draconian and really archaic laws, in my view.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think it's almost laughable that this is happening. Obviously, there's the sad part of what it means to freedom of speech, but it will be so ineffective, because we all know what happens. Like, people will use VPNs, they will have alter egos under which they block to circumvent these problems. You can't, it's like cutting off a head of a hydra. Like, it's not gonna work. And so,
I'm afraid to ask what it means for podcasting. I don't even want to go there. It's just shocking. But then,
that's your voice.
Imagine.
You can use like a voice distorter.
A voice distorter.
And sound like these guys that try to blackmail people.
Yes.
Sorry, speaking of text, I wanted to finish off a thought. So when you mentioned text, I actually went one direction. It seems you went the other. But the direction I went is, So I've got this digital identity. I can now essentially trade my information to make money or generate revenue. How do I get taxed for that? So how does that, from an accrual perspective, there now needs to be a tax or some kind of levy associated with me being, is it a capital gains tax? So I find that also another interesting avenue of discussion.
Because it's also like now an IP issue.
Correct.
To what extent is this actually a property? To what extent is it actually transferable?
Yes.
To what extent does it actually count as an asset in all the ways we think of an asset in tax terms?
Yes. Well, it becomes an asset when now so the definition of an asset is that something that you own that provides future benefit or future value. So this is now your digital identity. So it's absolutely an asset. It might be a new asset class, but it's absolutely an asset.
And then it speaks to how Facebook's getting away at the moment, and many other sort of software giants are getting away without having actual sort of registered presence in certain geographies.
Correct.
And going, well, only certain places have the right to call us up on because we're domiciled XYZ in certain XYZ. So in that context, again, what is IP? What do you own? Yes, what do you own? How is it taxed? Jeez. Oh my word, yeah.
And at the end, we come back to the circumstance that people need to own their data. They need to, there needs to be a central around the user, some sort of either protocol or storage that allows to map these transactions of value. Like if a person sells their data, if he sells it, say, to Facebook and to Twitter and to a big ad network like AdSense or whatever, then then there needs to be a central point where this transaction is logged.
Yeah.
And you cannot do this effectively by
you just whispered blockchain.
Those three companies agreeing on. Yeah, for example, blockchain could potentially be. It's still years in the future until it will really happen, but maybe. But you won't get these three companies to agree on a protocol. Very, very hard. And there's tons of other companies as well. I think the technology that we build in the long term could potentially bring us there. And so what WorldBrain and the Memex that we're developing. So the Memex is right now a search engine for your browsing history and for your bookmarks.
What's a Memex?
Search engine.
The Memex, yes. It's a full text search across all the websites that you visited and bookmarked. But later, the idea and the goal is to make the search across everything that you use. Like, be it your Facebook Messenger, be it your Facebook feed, be it your Gmail, be it your Slack channel, be it your notes, like whatever you use in order to organize and communicate your knowledge.
You see,
and
as a user, I'm kind of going, what happens when Memex turns against me?
The Memex itself is run entirely on your computer. And you get also the software to completely self-host the entire server. So no one is ever in control of that data but you. And obviously there's huge security risks.
I was going to say, you better not lose your laptop. You better have a secure server.
Yes, we still need to solve that. And I don't want to say we have solved that part and it's still a bit in the future to make that really possible. But essentially, if we solve this problem, and we don't solve them alone, it will be collaborative effort with a lot of other projects as well, to make that possible. But if we collectively solve this issue, it would provide the common denominator for data exchange to happen on a central point around the user. For example, now you have two note-taking applications. Why would those two note-taking applications develop completely different data formats? They could agree, or the user just says, here's the interoperable format. If you're developing a new note-taking application, you save a lot of development work by just taking the data format that is already there.
Yeah.
For example, and then you provide this kind of central point of data exchange. Then you can start logging internally in your machine how data flows, maybe with some sort of blockchain and crypto-enhanced technology that makes it unforgeable. So you cannot avoid your dues, stuff like that. We'll see.
So I want to close the loop on something we promised we'd talk about, and we really don't have time to dig into this now. But I do want you to sort of draw a line between what you've just talked about and how you're solving for the fake news problem. Okay.
So the prevalent strategy on solving fake news is to provide a singular rating on quality on what content is good or not. Right? Like Facebook tries now to make a rating on trust or attach related content to articles, but that's just one reality. It's one truth in itself. And I think even if we could scale this up, it would be unsustainable, because it means that I impose, or Facebook imposes, a certain value system on the selection of that content, which would alienate a lot of users right out of the gate that don't believe in the progressive values or the liberal values that Facebook has. And also those people who are critical thinking say like, no. If you're claiming to have a truth, then you're out of it. Like you cannot be trusted.
Yeah.
And so our approach is not to define a single source of truth and try to scale ratings up to all content in the world. We're trying to make it at least 10x, if not 100x faster for any user to understand a topic deeply and with as many perspectives as possible. So that's a general approach of how we think sustainability needs to work. How would that look like in practice? So the problem we're solving is one that you and I, we both do web research on a daily basis. And we have a very specific perception and experience that flows into that perception on how we look at content. So when I read an article, I think, for example, it's a GMO article. I read this article and I have, through my experience, I can gauge, is this qualitative? Do I trust the source? If I find a related paper, I have added a connection to content in my head. But I really cannot share this information with you. So when you go to this website the next time or research the same topic, you have to do the same work that I did before again.
Yeah.
And it's very unlikely that you're actually ending up with the same quality because you have a different experience.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's inevitably happening that you're going to be misinformed on this topic. I might be misinformed on topics that you wouldn't. So the idea is, how can we make it possible that we can effectively and without friction share our perception that we have on content? The perception of quality and the perception of context.
Is that hence WorldBrain?
Yes, like it's many brains connecting to form a more meta brain in that sense.
So we're gonna have to leave it there. And I mean, I feel like you've painted an awesome picture, and I encourage any of you guys who haven't been up until this point aware of the work Oliver and his team are doing at WorldBrain to go check it out at worldbrain.io. Certainly you've certainly caught our attention all the way out here, and this is a personal thing for me, because I'll close out with this little anecdote, which is just a few weeks ago, my parents are over at my place, and my dad is just turning into this fake news sharer. Can I say it again? Into this fake news sharing machine. I'm sorry, Dr. Leonard Masugu. No, but I say that with all the sort of fiction in the world, because he's 70 this year. He's an incredible intellectual, and he receives stuff from what he perceives to be a pretty quality network of people. And then once in a while he'll send stuff to me, and I'm just like, I'm in such shock at, the kind of stuff that I feel like, oh my word, Dad is sharing with his network. And so we've had this really difficult, we've had to have the talk with my parents about like what fake news is. I've had to share Jordan Peele's fake news public service announcement on YouTube, he did with BuzzFeed. And we were talking about this off mic, and we all have relatives or people we're close to, even within our professional circles, who are so, even myself included, if I'm honest, that the prevalence of fake news and our role in perpetuating the problem is so problematic, and hence why we really wanted to cast a spotlight on some of the work you're doing and encourage some independent thinking around these issues right here on the continent. Reach out to Oliver, find out how the problems we're seeing in East Africa, right here in South Africa, around misinformation of all kinds, weaponized information, the increasing problematic misuse of data, and how it's being deployed against us as a society. Like, it's our job to all care about how this gets fixed. And so thank you, Oliver, for sharing on that. And before we say goodbye properly, one last time, we certainly want to remind you all of the upcoming African Tech Roundup live podcast event happening in Amsterdam on Tuesday, June 5th. We're theming it #Village Diaries Amsterdam. The event will feature a panel discussion with UX designer at Booking.com, Babu Signoni, private equity director at Velocity Capital, Aled Lushinger, as well as a fireside chat and Q&A session with our special guest for the evening, Niger born Charles Ojay, who's the founder and CEO of Hyber. But you know who we really, really, really look forward to rubbing shoulders with there that night? And he says, you, our listeners, we can't wait to see you there. Our events are super interactive. So come ready to share and network with smart people and let your voice be heard right here on our podcast, aka our Village Square post the event. And so if you are in Amsterdam over that period, if you're Africa-focused founder, policymaker, impact or innovation architect, investor, do yourself a favor. Head to africantechroundup.com/live. Book yourself a seat to that event. africantechroundup.com/live. And so with all that being said, we're obviously going to need to have you back on the show, sir, at some point. We've got a long laundry list of incredible people to have on the show, but we're going to have to touch base with you, even if to just steal your thoughts for to enrich ours. But certainly we're going to keep you in our network. You're officially an African Tech Roundup Villager. Woo! Yeah.
I'm thinking of going to Amsterdam this day. Maybe we see each other there.
My guy?
It's not far for us.
My guy?
It's like a $50 flight.
Come on. Be there. Be there. It's going to be incredible. It's going to be incredible.
I have some good friends as well to visit again. So,
with all that being said, Oliver Sauter of WorldBrain.io. Thank you for joining us today. As always, thank you to Musa Kalenga, my main man right here, the dopest co-host. Thank you too for being here.
My absolute pleasure. Whoop, whoop. Good to see you, man. Good to chat to you, Oliver. Been reading about you, obviously. Big fan of the work. Big fan of the stuff you're doing. So hopefully we meet you in person. So we know that you're not fake.
It has to happen.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
He's not fake.
We're not talking to some hologram somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm actually not there. I'm a deep fake.
Oh, stop it! You're gonna.
There's another person next to me impersonating me the whole time.
You're gonna freak us out right this minute. So listen to our African Tech Roundup Villagers. Thank you too for listening in. That's it for now. Do take care, Africa.